Well, good morning, everyone. We'll be getting started here. Just waiting on everyone to populate the room. As you come in this morning, go ahead and drop your greetings
Well, good
into the.
morning, everyone.
Yeah, yeah, let me cut that down. Populate the room. As you come in this morning, go ahead and drop. All right, yes, go ahead and drop your greetings in. Let me know if you can see me clearly and the volume is adequate. If you could do that, I'd appreciate that, and we'll get started shortly. Good morning, Cheryl. Good morning, Genevieve. Good morning, Carolyn. Can you all drop a greeting into the chat box so we can get started this morning, knowing that everybody can communicate if they desire to do so? Thank you, Carol, and good morning to you this morning. Hope the weather's well down there in Mississippi where you're at. Good, good. All right, I see I got one person participating. Oh, good morning, Cheryl Rogers. Grand Rising, Grand Rising. And to those of you who are on the YouTube side of the house, good morning to you all. Also, go ahead and drop your greetings and your salutations. Let me know how things are going. Thank you, Cheryl, for the sound check. Good morning, Miss Williams. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're going to get started here shortly. Welcome to the spring of the year. We are over into the spring. Things are beginning to turn green, come up out the ground, come out of isolation, and people are beginning to move about more freely. So I'm excited about that. We have a nice weather pattern coming across St. Louis this morning. I think it's going to be right around 80 today, but then drop down to the 60s on tomorrow, I believe, and then ascend back up to the 80s through next week. Awesome. So we are getting started here. Oh, it's 84 in Mississippi, northeast Mississippi. Okay, Carolyn. Awesome, awesome, awesome. All right, we're going to, for the sake of time and to respect your time, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to give a 5 second silence pause so I'll be able to identify where to start the edit of the video. All right, good morning, everyone. And as we gather here today, we are also entering the spring of the year, as I mentioned. In the natural world, spring represents a period of visible results where what has been cultivated beneath the surface becomes observable. So, this provides a useful parallel this morning for the principle we are exploring today. What we consistently practice at the level of thought and awareness eventually becomes observable in our lived experience. Yes, I'm Greg Stanton, also known as Asar, and it's always a privilege to welcome you into Sunday Science of Living seminar. This is our space. It's our space where we can slow down, prepare for the week ahead, and take a disciplined look at how we are living. Not just what we say we believe, but what we consistently demonstrate. Let's begin by outlining our focus this morning. Today's focus, if you take nothing else away from the time with me, is this. New thought is not something to believe. It is something to practice. Everything we talk about today is going to support that idea. So let's start with what is new thought? We need to clarify this foundation. So many people throw around the term, "Oh, I'm inside of New Thought," but let's kind of give it a working definition this morning. New Thought is a modern spiritual philosophy and a contemporary expression of ancient wisdom at the same time. and it's grounded in a idea that the mind is causative. Now, not the brain, but the mind. So, in simple terms, this means that the quality and direction of our thinking actively shapes our perception, behavior, and ultimately our lived experience. This aligns with what contemporary psychology, particularly positive psychology, has also observed that patterns of thought influence emotional states, decision making, and overall well being. Now, New Thought extends this insight by treating thought not as an influence, but as a primary creative factor in how life is experienced. In other words, the way we consistently think and feel helps shape the kind of experiences we have, following patterns that are reliable and predictable over time. The science of living is the applied dimension of this idea. It is the disciplined use of awareness, that's the ability to notice your thoughts and reactions in real time. For example, recognizing when your thinking shifts into a worry or frustration frequency. Also, intentional thinking, deliberately choosing thoughts that align with the outcome you desire. This looks like shifting from this won't work to let me approach it this way or differently. Another one of the dimensions is emotional regulation, managing our emotional responses rather than being driven by them. Example, pausing and breathing instead of reacting impulsively. Another one is intentional speech. These are our guiding principles inside of the science of successful living. Speaking in a way that reflects clarity and alignment rather than reaction. Here's an example of that. Responding thoughtfully instead of saying something you later regret. And lastly, and most importantly, is aligned action. Taking action that match what you say you believe. An example being making decisions from self-trust rather than fear. So, in other words, New Thought provides the principles that we practice. The science of living provides the actual practice. So, now let's ground this in lived experience today. And as we move into this day, into this week, let's stay with a central idea. And that is, New Thought is not something to believe, it is something to practice. Think about that. New Thought is not just something to believe, it's something to practice. Because when you take what you believe to practice, it becomes something you know. There's a scripture says that it's the truth that you know shall set you free. So for many of us, the central challenge is not a lack of understanding of the teachings that you've gathered over the years. It is that we're not consistently practicing it. Now, there are some things that I don't consistently practice. But this morning, we want to look at the fact that it's not something just that we believe, a set of principles we have over there, but it's talking about practicing it. We've heard it, we've read it, we can even explain it. But in certain moments, we're not living it. The To understand this more fully, we have to look at how many of us, through our families, communities, and lived experiences, have been shaped. And again, this is not about belief, it's about what has been practiced across many African American communities, shaped by historical realities of slavery, Jim Crow, and ongoing systemic racism. Even when Jim Crow has disappeared and slavery no longer exists, there is a very real systemic racism that's permeating our society. And we're taught to endure this, but not always how to examine our thinking in a structured way. We're in survival mode instead of thriving mode. So as a result, patterns have developed, automatic reactions, that is, responses that are shaped by the need to stay safe or composed in environments where expression could have consequences, such as immediately becoming guarded or defensive in a tense situation because we know we can always express what we're thinking. Another issue is conditioned responses. These are learned ways of thinking and behaving that has been passed down through generational or generations navigating limitations and injustices. A good example of that is expecting difficulty or resistance even when new opportunities arise. So we can't even see the new possibility because our expectations are limited to what has happened. Another thing is habitual ways of interpreting situations. By default, perspectives shaped by historical and lived experiences, such as reading neutral situations as potential harmful ones or dismissals based on past experiences. So we got to understand that there's another way of dealing with life, to be proactive versus reactive. And here's the key insight: we were already practicing something. We were just practicing it in it unconsciously. So we all are practicing something, but we may not be aware that we are practicing things that really will not give us the outcome we desire. So at this point, the distinction begins to become clearer. This is not a rejection of belief this morning, for belief plays an important role. It shapes our expectations, directs attention, and can support or hinder action. However, belief alone is not sufficient. Without consistent application, beliefs remain conceptual rather than transformational. And that's why there's a big falling away in the traditional church. Because there's a lot of information, a lot of beliefs that are held, but they're not taken to action. They're conceptual rather than truly transformational. A more accurate statement is this: beliefs informs practice, but practice determines results. Now, new thought does not fail due to lack of belief. It appears ineffective when belief is not translated into consistent, applied practice over the time, or when the belief itself is not grounded in truth, yet is still reinforced through repeated practice. Let me give you an example of that. If someone has internalized the belief that they must always work twice as hard, you've heard that one, right? To be valued, that belief may not be inherently true in every present context. However, when it is consistently practiced or thought through overextending, over explaining, or second guessing, or doing more than we really need to do, it begins to shape our lived experience, reinforcing stress, exhaustion, and limitation. In this way, practice can turn an unexamined or outdated belief into a real reality, or what I would like to call a lived reality. Now, before we move deeper into, I want you to consider this foundational insight. What is consistently held in thought and reinforced through action, it tends to organize itself into what is known as a lived experience. This principle has been observed across philosophical traditions and increasingly supported even within psychological frameworks of behavior and cognition. I want you to consider this as an illustration this morning of practice, not belief. A musician was told, you practice the scales until they disappear. Not until you memorize them, until they become so integrated that you don't have to think about them, you become them. Know what that is? That's practice. And that's exactly how New Thought works. Now, let's apply this directly because this is where practice becomes visible. You don't rise to what you read. You don't rise to what you agree with. You rise to what you actually practice. You've heard it said, practice makes perfect. That's incorrect. Practice prepares. Remember that. Practice doesn't make you perfect, but practice prepares. So, in a moment of stress, in a difficult conversation you may be in a triggering situation, you are not responding from your beliefs. You are responding from your practice. You are responding from the thoughts that you allow to repeatedly run through your mind. Now, so now we can define this more clearly in terms of practice. What makes it a spiritual practice? What qualifies something as a spiritual practice? Well, I've come up with a couple of bullets. One, it must be applied consistently, consistent application, engaged on a regular basis rather than occasionally. Okay, for example, intentionally choosing your response in multiple moments throughout the day, not just when it feels convenient. Okay, so that's consistently. And then there's produce observable change. This is when it's a spiritual practice. It creates noticeable shifts in thought patterns, emotional responses, or behavior, such as responding with more calm and clarity in situations that previously triggered stress or reactivity. So that's what I call observable change, and you want to look for that. And here's another one. You lead to different results over time. That is, spiritual practices should lead to different results over time. Should result in measurable differences in experiences or outcomes, such as improved relationships, clear decision making, or reduced patterns of stress over weeks and months. If it cannot be practiced, it is not a practice. It may be inspiration, but it's not transformation. Now, let's look at New Thought as a practice. So, based on everything we've kind of touched on this morning, we can now make the case that New Thought meets that standard because it is not asking you to believe something, it is asking you to practice something, it is asking you to be something, to do something, to observe your thinking, to choose your response, to align your speech, to act with awareness, and to do that consistently. That's what New Thought requires of you. Let's take make this a this practice explicit this morning. So, what does that look like? This model that I'm talking about. Very simply, in the morning, align your thinking intentionally. When you rise, you align your thinking intentionally. During the day, you notice and you interrupt patterns. You become the observer and say, what am I thinking? What have been my thought this morning? And you interrupt the pattern if it's not the pattern that will give you the desired outcomes or serves your highest and greatest good. Also, in interactions, you can practice conscious speech and response. That is, choosing your words deliberately and intentionally. Okay? And being present to what is going on. And during the evening, perhaps you can reflect and recalibrate. I like to call it where we recapitulate. We go back over our day and we look at what transpired. And we don't just look for the positive things that transpired, but we look for those areas where we perhaps showed up less than perfect, that areas where our beliefs um, came forward that we need to adjust. And then what you do is revision that situation. What do I mean by revision? You play that situation back over in your mind, stating what would have been the more ideal thing to state, or in your mind, doing what perhaps should have been done. So this represents a basic but complete model of practice. So when we talk about new thought, it's not just another way to move through life religiously, but it's about practices. But I'm even finding in new thought the same things that are going on in what I would call the old church or old thoughts. People just ascribe to, they say they are a new thoughter, but thinking old thoughts. Now, and this is where practice become personal. From experience, one observation becomes clear. Practice is not demonstrated under ideal conditions. Practice is demonstrated under real conditions. It becomes evident in moments of activation when you are under stress, challenged, or emotionally triggered. It's in those moments your responses reflect not what you intend to believe, but what has been consistently practiced or what's in your toolbox. This provides a useful point of self assessment. Your reaction in difficult situations reveal the patterns that have been most reinforced over time. And if they've been reinforced over time, they don't change overnight. You want to move them down the scale little by little. But be aware, this is something I need to work on. Key insight today. If everything comes back to one idea, it is this: your life is not shaped by what you believe occasionally. It's shaped by what you believe frequently. It is shaped by what you practice consistently. You practice consistently what you believe or think about frequently. Your frequency is changed by the frequent thoughts you think. So let's bring this back to our central point that we started with. New thought is not something to agree with. It's something for all of us to practice. And when it is practiced consistently, it produces what I like to call observable results. So think about that. Before we close, consider this. If this space supports your growth, if it challenges you to think more clearly and live more intentionally, then I invite you today to participate in sustaining it, not as an obligation, but as an expression of alignment with this ministry. You can support this work via Zelle or Cash App using the phone number 708 368 1076. Someone can drop that in there. 7 in the chat. 708 368 1076. Because what we support, we strengthen. And what we strengthen tends to grow in our lives. Giving is a practice. It's a principle, but it has to be practiced. So let's bring it back to our central point. New thought is not something to agree with. It's something to practice. And when it's practiced consistently, I can tell you it produces observable results. Now, I want to take a moment and just pray an affirmative prayer. But inside of New Thought, our prayers have five um, key points to them. Recognition. We recognize that there's one life, one presence. It has a point of reference of unification, that life is expressed as me, through me. There's a realization part of the prayer. We choose aligned thought and action. And there's always gratitude, appreciation for growth and capacity, and even appreciation for what is. And lastly, there's the release. That is, we trust the law in action. Now, let's enter into a brief moment of recognition and alignment. Right where you are, take a big breath. And we'll use this simple structured form of affirmative prayer that's often called a treatment. And it moves through five movements of recognition, unification, realization, as stated earlier. So there is one life, one presence, one intelligence expressing throughout all existence. That same life is expressing as me. I'm not separate from it. I choose to participate consciously in this life by directing my thinking, regulating my responses, and practicing alignment in real time. As I do this consistently, my patterns change, my experience reflect that change. I acknowledge and appreciate the capacity to practice, to choose, and to grow. I release this knowing, trusting the lawful nature of mind, source, to act upon it. And so it is. Ashe. Amen. Awesome. This week, rather than focusing on increasing belief, focus on increasing consistency in practice, because that is where the change happens. Now, if you'd like to continue this conversation with me this morning, stay here. Let's talk about how this looks in real life, not just about what we agree with, but what we actually are practicing. So I invite you to stick around for the green room experience. For those who will be dropping off, thank you for dropping in, dropping by. I hope something has been said that's been uplifting and encouraging. And for those of you who are going to stick around for the get down, for the green room, let's go inside. Awesome. All right, good morning. I pray something was said this morning that each of you got something out of a golden nugget, and maybe you want to say what nugget you got out of it. So let's start the conversation this morning. We're right at the bottom of the hour, so we got a good 15 minutes. If you want to stick around, you don't have to stick around, but I'm here for the get down. So let me see what's been said here in that. Let me go to the chats to give you opportunity to formulate your thoughts and get your hands raised up. As I look in the chat this morning, I don't see any dialogue, but I see we have some people there on the YouTube channel. Welcome, my YouTubers. Now let me go over to the green room this morning to see those who are present. Wow, it's quite a number of people. Good morning, Carolyn. Good morning, Genevieve. Good morning to my iPhone guests. Maybe that's Al. Good morning, Mikhail. Good morning, Renee. Good morning, Cheryl. All right, let me look down through here, see if there's any no comments. But let's do this. If you have some insight about something, if you have a aha you would like to share, feel free to do that. Let me see. I see Cheryl is over here on the, that was, you just said Grand Rising. Okay, that was a more like something you typed in. But let's get a couple of participants this morning. Can somebody come forward? What did you get out of this morning? If somebody asked you where you been for the last 30 minutes, where would you say, where would you say you've been? And what would you say you got out of this morning's time together? Okay, let me see if I see any hands up. There's no hands up. Um, well, I'm not gonna badger you this morning. Um, I'm going to go ahead and move into the rest of my day, and I pray that you will do the same. And I offer you the opportunity to join me Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 6:15 a.m. for our morning meditation. So I'll see you then. But I see I do have one hand up. Good morning, Mikhail. Good to see you this morning. I pray things are well. You have the mic.
Hosanna and happy Sunday. Yes,
Yes,
hallelujah. All
Hosanna.
is well. All is well. Thank you for asking. So yes, it always takes me a second to get to my phone because I've set it down and I'm
Okay.
mic'd in from somewhere. But you've said several things today that have, I will say, continued the trajectory and helped me to stay the course and stay locked in on some things. But one thing that stood out to me quite a bit was when you said, I'm not asking you to believe anything, I'm asking you to do something. I'm
Yes.
asking you to practice something. I'm asking you to, because we all have the power to think a new thought, no matter what that thought would be.
Mm,
I
mm,
think that people tend to clump, especially when you talk about religiosity. You talk about the people who push religion one way or the other for whatever their reasoning would be. They tend to clump and then give code words and keywords, and all of them tend to funnel down into you're wrong and I'm right,
mhm.
right? And I think that what you said helps to expand what that looks like. No, you have the power to think a new thought, and that thought can be for you as
Yeah.
opposed to whatever it used to look like in your head, bouncing around, right? You can think
Yes.
this new thought, and once you think this new thought, the practice of it, the embodying of it is what's going to get you to the next level.
Yes.
And you don't have to worry about the belief systems that they have tried to give you or that you have tried to push upon. You don't have to. You just have to believe in yourself. You have to believe in that thought. So that was a moment for me. And I thank you so much for it, but it's always a moment. So
And
thank you.
if you would have shared that with me, and I would say I need to be where you were because you just knocked that out the park. You really embodied what the message was this morning. Really to think a new thought. And here's the thing that we have these old thoughts, and the term religion means to tie to. And
Mm,
so what we find religion has a tendency to do is to tie you to a set of ideals and beliefs that you have not even practiced yet. And the difference with new thought should be that as I think a new thought, I take a new action. So let's all
that's
not really focus on our beliefs, but the thoughts we have each day and take them to action. And when we take them to action, it'll tell us this is something I should continue to do because it gives me outcomes that I desire, or this is something I should cease and desist because the outcomes are not what I want to continue to experience. So, Mikhail, thank you for sharing that this morning.
You're very welcome. Thank
Awesome,
you.
awesome, awesome. Keep coming back. All right, Cheryl has a great question. Um, she says, "What is the difference between new thought and now thought?" So, new thought, which I shared with you, the general definitions earlier this morning's presentation, but now thought is this. Now thought is something that a term I believe that I coined because new thought for me is still old thought. Okay, but old thought that is not being practiced is just the same as a belief. But with now thought, that means we're always conscientious of what are we thinking? What is my very present thought? What is my now thought? Because it's my now thought that controls your next thought. Your now thought is the very thought that controls your action or contributes to your action. So that's how I look at that. Cheryl, I hope that helped. All right, all right, all right. If you want to, you can raise your hand, Cheryl, and we can have a dialogue. So I'm gonna step down the line here, and I see Genevieve. Good morning. I see your hand. You have the mic.
Good
I like
morning.
your moniker there. It says change begins inside of you. Yes.
Yes,
Change
yes.
begins inside of our thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I just wanted to piggyback on what the first lady, I can't remember her name, said, but just with
And
your
that
teaching,
was
all
that was Mikhail.
Mikhail. Yeah,
Hmm.
I agree wholeheartedly with her, and not just today's teachings, but all of the teachings that, for me, that I have put in practice is, and it goes down for me, one word: identity. Who are you being? Who
Yeah.
are you identifying as when you have the thoughts, or when the thoughts come up? If the thoughts come up from a person of low self concept, not sure, victim, or are you who you are as source? Is it identity coming from source? So that has helped me to go with the identity. So when I wake up in the morning, as you said, I put on the armor of who the identity, that everything's always working out for me, and that
Yeah.
I don't give any energy to any power. And you know, I hear people always say, um, I'm matching energy. So how we acting today, and my thing is that I don't match energy. I set the standard because
Yes.
of my identity. So yes, that's why I just want to put my 2 cents in there. I appreciate you and the whole family, of course.
Hey, I appreciate that, Genevieve. That was a very important point that often is missed, that we don't match energy. We should be emitting that energy,
Mm-hmm.
and our energy tells us who I attract, tells me the frequency that I'm putting out. So when I
Yep.
look around, if the most of the people around me are low vibrational people, that tells me I've emitted that, and that's what I'm aligning with. And so,
Mm-hmm.
so we look at people are mirrors. We just use the mirror that we can step inside of every morning to make sure our hair is right, our makeup is right, though being made up. But the real mirrors are who's showing up life. The real mirrors are what's showing up in your life. And those are the things that we need to work on. If who's showing up in my life is not representative of who I want to be in my life, then I need to shift my vibrational frequency and move away from that. And it's not always easy because we have our thermostats are set. And so we have to change the thermostat if we want to have what I would like to call consistency. Awesome. Thank you. We are the thermostat, not the thermometer. That's right, Genevieve. That's right. Awesome. Excellent. Let me see if there's anybody else here this morning. Cheryl, I want to give you the opportunity to come on this morning. Did that question get addressed fully for you? Uh, she may be multitasking or not able to come forward, but if you're in the room, please feel free to come forward. All right, so we're going to prepare ourselves to move out. Let me see here as I look across the room this morning. I see a couple people that normally are here that's not here that I want to make sure I check in on. All right, sure. Is your hand up there? Okay, it might have been up, but it's no longer up. Miss Jennifer said, yeah. Mikhail says we are the thermostat, not the thermometer, right? Okay, oh, she was saying she's just typing quickly. Okay, so that's all I have this morning. I'm not going to keep you hostage. I'm going to give you 15 minutes, 40,
Okay.
20 minutes back.
Okay.
Yes, sure. Hey, what's happening?
Asar. Okay,
Yes,
okay. I can't hear him though.
I can hear you.
Okay, so here we go. So Jeff is on the YouTube side and he wants to know, how does faith, or what role does faith play in the new thought and the now thought? Because you have faith, your faith is one thing, and then you get this new thought and it doesn't line up with your faith. How do you deal with that?
That is a great question. Jeff calling in from Baltimore. So first we want to start by defining what faith is, because we all use these terms, but sometimes we never look at what the definition of faith is.
Okay.
Faith is the practice expectation that is held consistently in our minds and become lived experience. So let me break it down for clarity. Faith is not blind belief, but
Mhm.
that's what religion will give you. Believe it because I said it. that settles it.
Mm-hmm.
I've engaged that a lot when I was growing up in the church. Faith is not a passive hoping. The word says faith is the evidence
Mm-hmm.
of things hoped for,
Mm-hmm.
but not just some people stay in hope, but true faith is evidence based.
Mm-hmm.
Um, faith is agreement is not agreement without action.
Mm-hmm.
So here's what I would say. Instead, faith includes the following: expectation, what you anticipate will happen. That's your faith. Okay. If you have faith in the doctor, you go to the doctor, and if the doctor prescribes a prescription, you go get the prescription because you have faith in it. So
Mm-hmm.
faith is based on where you go tells you about your faith. Where is your faith? Another
Mm-hmm.
thing about faith, it includes attention. What you consistently focus on is really your faith. And lastly, I would like to say there's what part of faith is what I would call reinforcement. What you repeatedly think about and act upon. And this means faith is not separate from practice. It's
Mm-hmm.
expressed through it. So what you practice is your faith.
Mm-hmm.
If people if they never go to church but they say they are believers of the church, that's you're not practicing your faith. So that your practice tells you your faith. If you have a situation where you sick in your body and the first thing you do is you run to the medicine cabinet. Now, there's if that's where your faith is, then you actualize it. Because if you run to the medicine cabinet, you're saying to yourself, I believe what I need is in that cabinet, and it could be the placebo. Maybe it not is the medicine don't even work, but the fact that you know the medicine's in the medicine cabinet and the doctor prescribed it, because I believe in my doctor, I'm gonna take the medicine. And so your faith is your practice. I'll give you a good example, Jeff. um, about 2 years ago, I believe now, I had a medical emergency. I was, and my blood sugar had spiked. And so when I got to talk to my doctor a couple of days later, she said to me that you are a diabetic. And then I had to stop her. My faith kicked in. I stopped. I said, whoa, doc, I appreciate what you're saying. But one, you don't know me. Two, you probably haven't read my chart because if you read my chart, you see I'm a 66-year-old, at that point, 64-year-old African American male that has none of the things that are consistently named amongst them. And so I think you would be better served by asking me some questions like, what is my faith? What is my practice? What I believe? Because I told her I said, I may have an experience, but it's not who I am. I'm experiencing diabetic issues in my body, but I am not a diabetic. And she was taken aback by it. But I stood my ground. Why? Because my faith. So, Jeff, I hope that helps. So, for many people, when we say faith, we automatically tie it to a religion or religious beliefs. But faith has little, everybody has faith. The word tells us to every man is given a measure of faith.
Mm-hmm.
But I know so many people who don't go to church, but the principle says every man is given a measure of faith. And the reality is all of us have something we practice because the thing we practice is the thing that we know, and that's our faith. So we can increase our faith, we can um, uh, strengthen our faith, we can change our faith. So thanks, Jeff. I hope that helped. Cheryl, do you think that does he have any comment over there on that side of the house? Okay, I think they're still with us. All right, that was a good question from Baltimore this morning. Good, awesome. Anybody got anything want to add to that? Did that spark any ahas from those of you who was with us this morning? All right, as you guys sit silently, maybe you're in a situation where you can't talk, but I want you to know that you've been seen. and I appreciate your presence. So, with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this morning's time together, and I look forward to seeing you all in the 6 o'clock hour on Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or perhaps Friday of next week. Peace. I'll see you next week.